Okay, so you've heard from all of our panelists, you've heard some insights into the kind of projects they've done. I'm going to open up the floor now. We've got about 25 minutes for questions, discussion, comments, any insights that you've particularly got from the panelists here at the front. So we've got loads of hands going up. What I'm going to do is probably take 2 or 3 questions at a time, give the panelists a chance to respond, and then go out back to the room again. So we've got a group of 2 or 3 just by Robin there.
Good morning. Thank you for the thanks the panelists. I would like to talk about the issue of career choice, and my contribution is the fact that I would like also have the mindset that is also a complex situation. Complex in the sense that there are a number of stakeholders apart from the students who need to determine, who will help in determining the career choice. The parents are obvious important stakeholders. So it's one thing to engage the students in school, but to also keep at the back of your mind that they're also being engaged continuously at home by the parents. A number of issues comes in. The parents probably have they have aspirations, they have dreams, what they want their children to be, and they probably have been engaging them right from primary school or through secondary school. So a one-time or a few exposure of the contact they will have with people coming to their school to talk about career choices may not be commensurate with the kind of engagement they get at home. The other thing to also keep in mind is the issue of career paths. So there are other science disciplines they could venture into, but then defining a proper career path for those other different disciplines will help them in modulating their choices. So the demands of the parents is on one side, the expectation of the society is another thing. So we have uncles coming in and say, oh, because your dad is an engineer, you're going to inherit his engineering company. The dad may be plain, but then you have relations coming in and engaging that child with that point of view. So it might be good to consider having sessions during PTA meetings wherein you come in and then you engage the parents with or without the children being present, and allow them to be able to open up their spectrum, to also be to be considerate in allowing the child to be flexible. Some things will probably go a long way in improving the outcome we desire. Everybody can't be a lawyer, everybody can't be an engineer or whatsoever thing, but if you enable the parents, if you engage the parents also, they may be able to provide a better climate at home and probably help the child in making a good decision. Thank you.
That's a really great point, thank you. Got another question just over there? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think just to reinforce it a bit is that from the context of probably developing countries, poverty also sometimes weighs down on the career choices that students make at an early age. And so the aspirations to be a doctor, for example, seem like more of, like you said, getting a path out of poverty. And that's the priority actually for these kids at an early age. So we know that attitudes and behavior are influenced at an early age. And some of these initiatives, like you do, probably need to increase the conversations and start engaging more with parents. And beyond parents also, the issue of role models, how do they fit in with trying to actually reinforce these attitudes and beliefs? Because you find that also doctors are susceptible to some of these diseases. Early on, when I was working at the National AIDS Control Program, we found that actually many doctors were getting infected and dying of HIV despite the knowledge that they had about the research in these diseases that affect the children. So beyond the careers, also the interest in research and science. And you find that also the issue of adherence, as was brought out in the movie yesterday, to drugs, is becoming such a global issue about just sticking to regimens. And because of these attitudes, we also have to have such space whereby we have these movies now shown and to such audiences at an early age, so that they at least learn what it means actually to take care of themselves.
Great, thank you. One last question before we go back to the panel.
So one of my experiences has been the resistance due to cultural and religious issues, and I believe maybe in some of the villages you work in, that's a big issue. So I wonder how you've handled that as penetration, because I remember interacting with a 12-year-old who came to me and said, and she was very bright and very good in sciences, but she said her mom had told her that all scientists are not Christians, and so am I not a Christian? And so she's not planning to do science or do anything science related. It's not part of the culture. And in Kenya, for example, that's a very big issue for scientists, is that scientists are atheists, they don't believe in God, and then other cultural differences. So I'm just curious to know how you handle that when you're trying to penetrate these types of issues.
Fascinating question. Okay, so we've got two questions about careers, and they both kind of talk about the interaction between the student's individual choice, but also what's going on elsewhere, be that in society, be that home, and obviously a really fascinating question about how science education can come up against other cultural factors. Who wants to go first in tackling any of those?
So I'll share a little bit on the experiences of scientists not believing in God. In fact, we saw that when we were running. So we ran a scientist project in January, and some of the questions that would come from students is, you are a scientist, so do you believe in God? So they would really ask that question. So when Imran is saying that, I remember seeing that question several times being asked to the scientists. So I think it all depends on the background of where that student comes from, and also deciding. And also, I think it gave a good way to the scientists to really be careful on answering that question. So some of them will say it's because, in fact, they gave example, I go to this church, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Christian. So that way they got to feel like, so these people are religious people, some of them. So it was a good way, we saw that coming up. And also in terms of the career choices, like what I'll share from Kilifi, we come from a very poor background, and the schools that we visit will say, most of the students will not even say they want to be doctors. They will tell you they want to go into army. That's their first choice. So you ask them, what do you want to become? Then they tell you want to be. And the half of the, like 50 out of 50, 40 of them will tell you they want to be Kenya Defense Force. So it becomes very hard for you to even like put the aspirations up and tell them that there is this another line they can choose. So I think it's partly because of most of the community people, most of them, like you find in a homestead, maybe 2 or 3 people are in Kenya Defense Force, so they know, oh, so that's the only career that I can take. So we give them a wide range of career paths they can follow. So that's what I'm saying. And
just with the example you gave of the students asking the scientists if they're an atheist or if they're religious, when the answer comes back, I'm an atheist, how do the young people respond?
I think most of the answers were like, oh, I'm a Christian, I go to this church. So the scientists, because we looked for local scientists, people who have worked mostly in KEMRI and also at our local university in Plenary. So there are people who they fall, either they are Muslims or Christians. So so it felt like, oh, okay, so these people are religious. Apart from them being scientists, they are also religious people.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, I've had that question as well, and the easiest answer that I always give is that I just consider science and religion as 2 sides of the same coin, because you can scientifically back religion, or there's some religious people may not agree with me, but it's the easiest answer that I always give to people who ask that question. Just think of it as 2 sides of the same coin. In terms of the careers, so again, I have put on career workshops for mostly the Black community in Essex, and it'll be on a weekend, so the invitation goes out to the parents and the kids. So the couple that I've done, the parents have been there with the kids, so it helps. Both sides are getting the information, and it's key when you're targeting that audience, when you're selecting your scientists or your career people to come from those areas that those people are from, because it makes it easier for them to always believe the message you're putting across to them.
I also look at the career one. The religion one doesn't. In our country, we don't have that problem. But what we have done is, because we realize that the choice of career has a lot to do with the economic factor, we have included a topic, an activity during our camps where we look at the business side of science. So the students are put into teams and they come up with, they identify a problem and imagine that they come up with a solution to that problem, or whether it's a drug that they're coming up with, and then they design a business plan of how they are going to translate their discovery into a business. And then they do presentations in competitions and we give them prize money for it. When they do that, it's amazing. They start behaving like business people. So we start challenging them that the fact that you're a scientist doesn't make you a useless person who just stays in a lab and that's all. You can actually become a rich person out of that. So we introduce them to the concept of patenting and networking with business investors and so on. That's one approach that we have used. So when they go out, they think it makes money. But in Zimbabwe, we also have the curriculum has been changed to have a STEM focus. And so there have been massive campaigns through the media. And we have discovered that when there is a lot of media campaign supporting a particular concept, people normally listen to what the media says. And they say, that's the way to go. But the last thing is, out of the camps we have been doing, one observation we have done is now informing our next camps. We have discovered that for parents to be involved, they need to have direct contact with students in their projects. So what we are planning to do is that students do projects in their communities. They go back and there's a cluster of about five schools. They identify a problem in their community, a health challenge, and then develop a model to explain it to the community, come up with a solution that incorporates the scientific intervention, ethical consideration, social and legal consideration. And then when they do that, we then do an exhibition where all the parents in that community come for a meeting for those schools, because every parent has got a child in that community, in a school in that community. And then they do an exhibition to say, in our community, you all know that we have got a problem, say, of typhoid. And this is what we think is causing it. Then they do the scientific explanation of it using their model, and then they propose the solution that they have had. Because the solution that they come up with is out of interactions with the community. They go and do research work in the community where they're interviewing people in the community and coming up with a solution. So that way the parents realize that these children are actually proposing a workable solution for the challenge that we all have. And then they begin to appreciate that children can actually take up careers that can solve our challenges.
Great, thank you. I think we all want to meet some of Frank's little business people now. They sound great. Yeah, go for it.
So I could ask something about the relationship between like school engagement for children and their career pathway. So I think like that's fantastic if like after joining the school engagement program, could support for the development for the children to follow their scientific like as their career in the future. But on the other side, I do believe that the role of the school engagement program is also to support the children to develop their scientific like mindset thinking, because once they have it, it will support for their it benefit for them to make right decisions in their life. And it's also important for them to know that we do science because it is part of our life. We do science because like it's part of like the social, individual, and society change, and that's why we need science. Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, going to take 3 more questions now. How about these 3 over here at the front?
Hi, thank you very much. It's been very fascinating. So I just wanted to comment on the struggling to find schools or reach schools. And being new to the engagement with schools, I found that tagging on to existing groups to form a collaboration seems to work quite well. And at the moment, we're also exploring using science festivals to sign up schools and researchers. And then another point I just wanted to raise was the ethics of engaging with schools. We had a brief discussion yesterday with Grace on some of the challenges she's faced. And one of the things we've done, I think it's also because of how we are situated within the HR Africa Consortium. We've got an ethics and community engagement working group. There were kind of some discussions around the ethics around the platform we're using. And so before we even started piloting or implementing, we actually took the whole concept to the ethics, to our IRB board to approve and think around the ethics around that before we implement. And another, just the last point is on competences. We had a small meeting yesterday with some of the school school engagement practitioners in this group, and it was very fascinating that if you're trying to develop content for a school engagement activity, it's very hard to find a model or a guide on exactly how to develop that content. And we've started thinking around the competencies we're trying to develop, or maybe like kind of, I wouldn't call it a curriculum, but a guideline which is guided by competencies we're trying to target. Because most of these competencies are not made explicit. When you start developing, you kind of know you want people to have lateral thinking at the end of it. So we're starting to think around that.
Sorry, just on the ethics, do you mean getting the students to debate the ethics, or do you mean whether it's ethical to
so it's actually the activities that you're doing, how ethical are they, and to think about possibilities, challenges, or ethical challenges that you might encounter.
Yeah, thank you. We had 2 questions here.
Thank you very much. When Frank was talking, I could relate. In Botswana, I think our curriculum is quite similar. We are taught to tackle the exams. Most of the time, when you study to pass the exams. But to an extent whereby certain formulas like board mass, which is brackets of division of, you have a name for it so that you remember. I remember in some physics lessons we were taught even to sing a formula so that even when it comes to the exam, you just sing that and then you simply fill in the rest. So somewhat, maybe if you look at it, Africa's problems, maybe we need to find a way to structure it in such a way that how do we make our students realize that our problems are somehow our wealth, that's our assets, that by solving our problems, somehow it's becoming wealthy, and then say coming scientists and becoming wealthy and business people in relation to science. So now, the challenge now, maybe my question would be, how do you prepare students for jobs that they don't know? Like, you know that in early days, the popular jobs were teachers, policemen, nurse, and soldier. But now we have a lot of other careers, and they are beginning to fill up, hence a problem of unemployment in Africa. So now you have this challenge of science coming in your backyard, and how do you prepare the students for jobs that you don't even know yourself?
That's a great question.
All right, thank you very much. My question goes to Frank. You talked of going out in the schools and conducting experiments. So my interest was on after the experiments. What happens now? Because I would give you a situation in Malawi. For example, at Work on Trust Malawi, we have a program, an outreach program, where we go in schools and conduct these exhibitions with the students. But now the problem comes when you leave the schools, and many of the schools do not have the equipment to practice or continue what you've introduced to them. So I was just interested to know how is it in Zimbabwe, and if you have a similar challenge, how do you overcome that challenge? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Am I right in thinking, Robin, we only have 5 minutes left? Okay, so what I'm going to do then is ask each of the panelists to perhaps consider those last round of questions and respond how you will, but also if you've got any final thoughts you want to leave with the room, feel free. So we've got questions about how do you find schools, kind of how do you think about the ethics, how do you think about the competencies. It's a really interesting question about kind of jobs that don't even exist yet, how do you prepare those? And of course we've got that question about how do you engage with the schools too. Hephzi, can I start with you? Because there was that interesting question about competencies, and it sounds like you have a bit of a kind of a trial and error approach, and that's the way you find what works. How do you compare that to trying to write it down beforehand?
I was in that meeting with her yesterday. It's something I'm still navigating and trying to work around. I think, and again, something that we realized yesterday, that it's a struggle to pinpoint the one thing. And so at the end of the day, you probably have to look at different case studies and then pull from those and see what the overarching competencies come from. So come from all those individual case studies or different projects that people have done, and the key competencies that people would or do take away from those. So we're still brainstorming around that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Thanh, how about you? Any final thoughts on any of those issues?
I like the question from about how the school works support for those students that they may want to do something else for their job. So one of our objectives from the school engagement program is about to increase the scientific thinking of the children. It means that through our work, we try to develop them an understanding that a process of scientific from their mind. First of all, we produce a whole participation. That's where the student they explore the things from making observation, and then they make their own hypothesis in order to identify or to confirm for their hypothesis through conducting a series of experiments, and then after that they come up with a solution. And linking to a real job like career, for example, like one student they may ask, okay, I don't want to be a scientist, but I want to be a musician, for example. So if you want to be a musician, you can apply the scientific project that you have learned from our school program. What you should make observation around you, and you may come up with a hypothesis like either I am suitable for a musician or a scientist. And in order to respond for your question, you need to participate in different kind of activities around in your school or in your life with your friends in order to find out that either you have capacity or you have skills enough to become a musician. And at the end of a series of activities, they can it will help the student to answer clearly about either he or she should become a musician or should be something else better for her. So in conclusion, that once the student they have the scientific mindset in their mind, it will benefit for them in order to realize what they should be or what kind of job should suitable for them.
Okay. Grace, do you want to talk about the ethics issue? Because it sounds like you were touching on that in your intro as well.
We were just discussing with Victoria, and what came into my mind as we were discussing, there's some ethical issues, because we interact with these students, like some of the activities that we do is we go to schools and do career talks with the students. So you might get one or two students who are really, when you look at them, you can clearly tell the kind of background they come from. So in terms of where you come from, you know that there are ethical issues. If you assist this student, then it raises expectations, and you really don't want to go to that line. So it becomes, you really have to balance things out and know why you are there and do what you are required to do. So, yeah.
And what about the issues around the actual science that you're getting across? You talked about, taking the blood samples, and, how do you judge what level to take that to them with?
Okay, so we do, because also our curriculum is also based on exam centered. So for us, we relate to what they're taught in schools, so that they get a clear understanding of what is it that they learned in school. Can they practice it? Can they see it practically? And so that they can see, because most of the schools do not have a well-equipped lab. So when they come to our center, they will see how a cell looks like, or how malaria parasites look like in with their own eyes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Frank, I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay. There was a question about what happens after experiments, given that schools may not be having laboratories. We have exactly that situation in our country, where there are schools that don't have laboratories, or if they have a laboratory, it's a building with a few chemicals and some few acids. So what we have, because our program has a focus on increasing visibility and interest, what we have done is we challenge the students to develop models that they then put in their schools. So one of our tasks is to say, if you want to do experiments, certain experiments, you need certain models to use. And we are only thinking about buying those things from somewhere. But we can also develop some simple models for ourselves. So the students have a fascination of developing some models for their schools. There's a term they use there in Zimbabwe, improvisation. Though it has its own challenges, because some models you can't improvise certain things because you just have to have the actual thing. But it has worked to some extent. But we are also contemplating setting up what we're calling district centers, where in a community there is a laboratory in a district, where schools that can't afford to build laboratories can periodically come to those centers for experiments, like a shared facility. So we're still contemplating it. We've been discussing with the ministry around that. We hope it will come out, though the ministry want that to politicize it, actually. So that's what we are still struggling with. But we think that it can be a solution to that. But can I quickly also attempt to the question of how do you prepare students for jobs that don't exist? I think that has been one of the challenges we have been facing, where students or parents ask you, okay, we understand what you are trying to do, but do those jobs you are talking about exist in Zimbabwe? And if they exist, do they pay? And then you find yourself talking about one institute, our institute, as the only place where they can then work. and so we have been encouraging them to say, Lord, don't think of the world in the sense of Zimbabwe. Think of it from a global perspective. You are becoming a scientist so that you participate in the global platform. And that way, it works to some extent. Though others say, I've never been out of Zimbabwe, and you're telling me about getting a job in some global place. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Frank. So what I'm taking away from this, sadly we're out of time. I know there's some questions left in the room, but perhaps we can discuss those with the panelists over lunch. But what I'm taking away is that it's not just getting across the science that's complicated, it's the whole enterprise, whether it's engaging with the parents, the teachers, the connection between the science and the rest of society. All of those relationships are complicated, and it is a challenge. But I think that creates opportunity as well, in that if it works, what you're doing is not just improving young people's scientific understanding, you're raising their aspirations, you're changing the community, you're potentially improving an entire nation's aspirations as well. So I think the complications are good, even though they can be hard to overcome. Can you join me in giving a quick thank you to our panel for being so generous with their talk for today?